Welcome back, sawheads. Well, if you've been surfing the internet on the lookout for hose, then you've come to the right place, because I've got some here. So this is the automatic oil pump pickup pipe connected in there, and this is the manual oil pump feed. So the original manual oil pump feed hose is this one here, and I've replaced it because it's gone a bit soft over the years, and as you can see the ends have been pretty much garroted by the little wire clips, and I've replaced this one particularly because it's easy to, and also because the yellow one it operates under pressure, so it's more likely to leak than the automatic one, which operates under a vacuum, or at least oil's being sucked up from the reservoir here. So I was thinking of maybe coming up with something better than these wire clips, but I couldn't, so I've reused them. Anyway, it seems quite good, but again, this one's a bit shorter than I'd like, and of course when you're actually operating on the saw, the AV mounts do allow for movement. I can just simulate this, well, or maybe I can't. I'll push down, you can see that moving like that, and when you're actually operating the saw, it'll move down like this and stretch the hose, but hopefully that will be okay. So next step is to get the muffler on. So here's our muffler. It's a bit kind of the worse for wear under the paint, but I've given it a sandblast and a coat of high temperature enamel. This is the jungle muffler. Time and corrosion has done the work of a muffler mod. You can see it's basically just an empty box now. There was a sort of, there's the remains of a sort of perforated thing in there at the top, but the bottom part has ceased to exist, but that's fine by me. So first thing to go in is this sort of cup thing here, that just drops in, and we've got a spark arrestor which goes in there, and then this is the original exit vent thing, but this was just a bit too far gone for me to reuse. It's got a hole in it here as well, so I knocked this up. Not quite sure that the style is right, but it'll do for now to get us up and running. Goes on there, and then can get it screwed down. So the first thing is to get these load spreading clippy things in place. One there. And one there. Then I've made up a nice copper gasket to go in there. And go on like that. Right. There we go, that's sorted, all torqued up and ready to go. I could perhaps have painted the screw heads with black enamel as well, but yeah, that'll do for now. Time now to look at the carburettor. This is the ubiquitous HS series carb from Tillotson. This is an HS 136C. Now I'm not going to do an exhausted carb video. There are plenty of guys on YouTube who can do that much better than I can, but there are a couple of points to note with this specific model. The first is they've added a governor here, this brass screw here, and it contains a spring and a ball check valve, and the idea behind this is that when the saw hits 10,500 RPM, the ball and the spring will resonate, i.e. start bouncing around, and that will open the valve and allow fuel to be dumped in through. You can just see that hole in there right by the choke butterfly. So yeah, that'll dump more fuel in and cause the saw to four-stroke, and it'll limit revs. I'm leaving that screw in as is for a moment. Popular thing to do is to block this off to get a bit more oomph from the saw, but I'm going to leave it in for now just to see what it does before I make any decisions on that. Now the second point is just a little test I like to do to check things under these two Welch plugs here. So this is for the high-speed jet, and on some models of this carb you also have a high-speed jet check valve which stops stops air being drawn into the metering chamber here under idle conditions. Now this particular model, it just has a very fine wire mesh screen. The idea of that screen is that it gets covered in fuel, and the surface tension of the fuel stops air being drawn back up. Then under this Welch plug we have the low speed jets, and they're fed by a little hole down in there, and the high speed fed by this hole here. Now we can just pull these plugs out and see what's going on under there, but I prefer to test things, see if they're working properly. We need to test if these plugs are sealing properly. We can test if the high and low screws can be shut off completely. We can test if when they're open there's fuel flow, so we can test for blockages, and also we'll be able to test to see if this governor valve thing here is working properly. It should be closed when nothing's going on. So to prepare for the test, I've closed off both of these needle valves here, and I've got an adapter here to screw on the top, but before I put that on, I'm going to put just a little bit of two-stroke oil. So this hole here supplies the high speed jet. There's another hole down here which supplies the low speed, and then the governor is fed from a hole down there. So a little bit of red two-stroke oil, that'll act as a tell if any of these are leaking, then we'll see the oil appearing inside the venturi. So I'll get this screwed on now. I'm going to apply some pressure, about 5 psi, and that's very much not holding. So let's take a look and see where it's leaking. So you can see that's the hole for the governor there, and you can see it's actually red. If I give the pump a little pump there. So the governor itself appears to be leaking. Here's the governor valve. So the inlet is at the side here, and then the outlet is at the top there, and then there's also this copper washer which goes in there. You can just see the ball in there. Then in the carb itself, you can see at the bottom that hole goes to the venturi. And there are 2 holes in the side. The lower one is a threaded hole for the screw which holds the inlet metering needle rod, and the other hole at the top there is the inlet for fuel, and that's coming from the fuel metering chamber. Now it's possible that the reason this thing was leaking was that I did take it out to clean it, but when I put it back in I used thread lock to seal the threads, and when I opened it back up there was thread lock all kind of in the holes where they shouldn't be. But in any case, I've decided now that perhaps I'm not so interested in seeing what this thing can do. It might have a disadvantage. For example, if it's leaking slightly and I tune the saw with that leak present, and then suddenly it stops leaking, then the saw will run lean and might explode. Maybe far-fetched, but anyway, if I take this out of the equation, it'll also make it easier to tune the saw when it comes to it. So I've just made up this little copper disc thing here which will take the place of the washer, and that will block the hole off and render this inactive. And in addition, this time I've used some PTFE thread sealing tape on the threads instead of thread lock. So here we go, disc first. Now the valve itself. Okay. I had to crank this valve down good and proper to get it to seal nicely, but it's sealing okay now. However, I also found that air was leaking out past both these threads here, so I've put a bit of PTFE thread sealing tape on these as well, and now we're rocking a steady 5 psi. It's been like that for quite some time. Now I'm not even sure how much of a problem having a slight leak here would be. However, given that all of the carb inside is operating below atmospheric, there's a chance that air would be drawn in through these screws here. And if that's the case, it only takes a very small amount of air to replace the fuel, and we might get a somewhat erratic fueling situation. But anyway, I've been successful with the PTFE tape, so we can move on. Just check that when we open these screws, we should be able to watch the pressure drop. So that's one. And that's the other. So that's good. There's no blockages. So I'm happy that this carb is, with a bit of extra luck, going to do what it's supposed to. So gasket first. Metering diaphragm. Cover. And some little screws. There's one. I'll get the rest in shortly. So the carb's back together. Now I'm just going to open up these screws to the factory setting. So for high, it's 1 turn, half 1, and for the low, it's 1.2 turns, half 1. It's about right there. And we can just for fun, check that the metering needle will hold pressure, so we'll give it 5 psi. We can blow into this vent hole here, and that should push the diaphragm down, and we should see the pressure drop like that. Time now to install the carb and its associated components. So carburettor, we've got a gasket which I shall reuse. We've got this screwdriver guide piece of plastic thing here for the high and low screws, and we've got the intake elbow with long bolts there, then the throttle linkage, and finally support bracket which goes at the rear. So to begin with, I've put on the plastic screwdriver guide here, and then just got an aluminium clip here to hold the gasket in place. So the first thing is to get the choke linkage connected. in the screwdriver guide has to push onto a boss. More or less like that. Next we'll see if we can get the lower screw lined up. Okay, that's caught. Next, this support bracket and the other screw. That's caught as well. Just unwind that slightly. That's got it. Next, the screw for this little bracket. And the more observant of you will have noticed that the fuel line seems to have become too short. Unfortunately, it would appear that I've put it in the wrong way round. That means taking the whole thing apart again to get to this. But I won't put you through that torture. I shall suffer this one all alone. Not a big deal though in the grand scheme of things, and it certainly won't prevent us from getting this throttle linkage installed. Not quite getting full throttle, but that's what this little loop is here for. We can just stretch out the linkage a little bit. So just a tiny bit of extra length on the throttle linkage, and now we've got full throttle situation. I've also just wound in the idle screw until it just nudges the throttle open a little bit. Finally, we can just take a look at the choke operation, which is also functioning correctly. Right, I'm off to rectify this short hose situation. Well, it was only 5 minutes to remove the tank, so not a big deal at all. But I guess this probably isn't original, and maybe it's not even the right hose for the saw. This is how I had it, the short end poking out. If I swap it round, look, that's not long enough, it won't even reach the bottom of the tank. Well, I am slightly perplexed as to how this pipe has lost its length. I mean, even if I really stretched that, bear in mind I'm stretching it over the choke mechanism here, it's really not going to reach. I would have thought I would have spotted that at teardown. But anyway, no matter. I checked my sleeve. It turns out that I have just one extra trick up it that I hadn't seen before. Now normally I would find the idea of extending this pipe with a connector an abhorrent idea, but in this case I'm going to use a bit of translucent Tygon fuel pipe, and that will have an unintended benefit. Just made up this copper doofer here with a little bit of copper wire soldered in the middle, so we know where the middle is. And now the advantage of this translucent fuel hose, of course, is that it's now much easier to check if fuel is being drawn up into the carb. Just a quick glance and you can see. So that's all good. Well, this video is getting on for being half an hour long, so if you've made it this far, my condolences to your family and loved ones, because it's more than likely that you've spontaneously died in front of the telly. If, however, your internal organs haven't given up with the tedium of it all, congratulations are in order. So I shall leave this video here, and the next instalment will follow shortly. Thanks for watching.